Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second office hours for the automated class and enrollment maintenance toolset. The format for today, if this is your first office hours that you're joining of ours, it's going to be very wide open. We have, again, our same experts that have been, or our specialists that have been helping out with the design and development, and on the other webinars and calls, they're here to help answer and really deep dive into any configuration questions or usage questions that you might have around the tool sets or how to apply them specifically for your use cases. So we are really here to help y'all out. So a quick show of hands, if you can please, who all here, is this your first time seeing the tool sets? Please raise your hand. And you could do that from the UI. Okay, excellent. It seems like most folks have had a review of the tool sets. If you have not seen the tool sets, yes. Okay, thanks, Ashi. And I saw another. If you have not, please feel free, head out to our website, www.sierra-cedar.com/he-class-enrollment, and we will paste this into the chat as well. From our main website, it gives you the ability, you can get a high-level overview, and then this is where to start the actual process to request the tool sets. You fill out this little request, we'll send you an agreement that needs to get signed, you'll send it back to us, and then we will send you out the latest version of the tools along with the user guides. We have a really in-depth user guide to go along with the tool sets. Everything from how to install it to tips and tricks and all of that fun stuff. If you haven't seen yet the original overview that we had in this session here, you can request the playback, and this is about an hour-long session where we really deep dive into the tools, how they work, etc. So if you're curious exactly on how to use them or more detail, I would come here to the view playback for this session. Our office hours from the last session is also available for your browsing and to watch, and that's from this link here. And then after this session, we'll be posting the other playback in this area. And we do have the HUG Open Forum next week. This is going to be hosted by HUG, and again, it's going to be a similar format as more and more institutions and colleges have a chance to actually leverage the tools. Hopefully we get some more deep dive questions, and it's really your way to ask us those kind of things so that we can get back to you quickly and not hold you up from your business processes. So let's jump back over. The folks that we have from our side on the call, I'm Chris Cameron. We have Bob Lawson, who's helping us from the project management perspective, and he was also part of the design team. We have Vicki Cooper, Ken Epstein, Melissa Young. They're all student records consultants, fantastic, and they're absolutely integral to the design of this and the testing. And then Kevin Kelly and Kelly Owens are core developers. So we are all here to help answer any questions that you guys have. We rolled out an updated version of the code last week based on some items that were discovered, so thank you for those. The team is actively working on a couple of enhancements requests that we've received. We received a couple of requests around meeting patterns and the facility ID on meeting patterns. So that is all in design. And if we dive into the screens today, you're actually going to see the screens that you see will actually include all of that new functionality. We're currently wrapping up the coding, and it'll go into testing this afternoon and should be ready for a general release early next week. So your feedback has been fantastic, and we're hoping that this next release will help you all even do more with the tool sets. So with that, let's open it up. Please feel free, leverage the chat for your questions. And if it's something really detailed, we can open up microphones and such. Just feel free to ask if you've got a long question and you'd like your microphone opened up if you're not able to do it yourself. So questions or requests, anything maybe with a show of hands, how many of y'all have actually loaded the tool sets into your application and have started testing? Okay, so it looks like we have some that have started testing. Maybe what we can do while we're waiting on any detailed questions that we have going on, Melissa, did we have any follow-up questions that we still needed to respond back to?
Many of the questions from prior sessions and from initial release with our pilot schools were in the areas of, are we copying meeting patterns, facilities IDs, the dates and times, the instructors? So the versions that you all have right now do not have that, but this is the portion that Chris was talking about that we are working on including those updates to release for the next one. I'm wondering, we do have some few familiar names and then a few new names. So I'm wondering, Chris, if it might be helpful just to do like a 5-minute view of the tool set first, and then I think we can do deeper dive into some of the other questions.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Thanks, Melissa. So to start off, and again, this is going to be our 36,000 feet up, because the other sessions, the overview session that we did is a full-blown hour on details for this. But the tool sets incorporate two pieces of functionality. And those pieces are essentially what we're calling the class schedule maintenance and the class enrollment maintenance. And apologies if the screen is flashing for y'all. I'm not sure if that started to happen yet. As I'm navigating around the way GoToMeeting is doing, we sometimes get some flashing, but the recordings will not have that. So apologies if the screen appears to flash as I'm navigating around. The use cases that we were trying to solve with these free tool sets that we're giving out to institutions and colleges, we realized that with pandemic or with social distancing, our schedule of classes may need to change pretty significantly for this fall. So because of that, we wanted a quick and easy way for the registrar's office to be able to go in and start interacting with the schedule of classes for the first piece. If we took a use case, for instance, of let's say all of or the majority of our classes, they were all in-person classes, and now our state policy or our local regional policy is that we have to transition from in-person to distance learning, then we need to then go update our schedule of classes to change the instruction mode. So the first piece of this was to be able to search and slice and dice on your schedule of classes in order to identify what sort of classes you wanted to touch. So I'm just going to let's look at anthropology. I'm going to pull up all anthropology classes in our fall term. And then from this interface, I then get all of the class sections based on my searches. The search functionality was geared off from the maintain schedule of classes page. So we mimicked it pretty closely. That you'll find that there are some additional search options. Specifically, one key item to note is our enrollment capacity. So you could select classes that are high in enrollment capacity. Let's say we wanted all classes that are 50%, and it's just a full digit instead of a percent, but 50% or higher. We could do a search, and okay, so we have two classes that come up that are have a capacity that's 50% or higher. And that is our Anthro 102, Section 1 and Section 3. You can see that our current enrolled capacity is 10, and the enrollments are actually 11. So we're actually over capacity on this class. So what we could do is if we wanted to interact with this class, we could either interact onesie-twosie, and from this interface, we can change the status if we wanted to close it. We can change the capacities. We could lower it back down to 5 because now we can't hold as many students in the room. Maybe we want to update the waitlist capacity, maybe not. And maybe we want to change the instruction mode. This one's on internet, but let's say we want to move this one back to in-person, but we're going to shrink the size of the class so that we can have social distancing. So now what we could do is if I ran this program on this single class, this is going to go out, it's going to use a component interface into the maintain scheduled classes areas, and it's going to it's going to change the enrollment capacity to 5 from 10, and it's going to change the instruction mode to P. If we had lots and lots of classes that we were doing this to, we could, via this defaults to apply, at a mass level, we could apply, for instance, let's change the mode all back to in-person, which is P. And let's change the capacity, let's change it to 4. We could apply it to a single class, we could select all, and we could apply it to all. And as you can see, it updates all of them. If there were hundreds of classes here, that would be a very quick way to interact with your mode. A new feature that is going to be rolling out next week is the update to facility. This is going to give you the ability to override any facility IDs that are in your meeting patterns. So if you had, for instance, an in-person mode, and then you were going to virtual, for instance, you're going to want to potentially wipe out the facility ID. So you could do that with this new piece of functionality, or you could override it and set a new facility ID, and this will impact all meeting patterns for that actual class. We can run it, and then the scheduled classes are going to get updated accordingly. The next piece of functionality we have here is the cloning functionality. So if we took our use case of this original class for Anthro 102 Section 1, it originally had 10 enrollment capacities for the students. We went down to 4, and we've got 11. So really, we need 2 more classes in order to hold all of those students, because we're going to have an overage now. So what we could do is we can use the clone functionality, and we could say, give me 2 more. Once we clone it by 2, it'll create the new sections. It'll also clone any associated classes with it. So if this was a lecture and it also had, let's say, a lab and a discussion, for instance, those sections would also be cloned, and they would be associated with the same association number. We also have the ability, and this is new functionality that's going to be rolling out, is the functionality around the meeting patterns. So we can copy the meeting pattern now. We could copy the days and times, we could copy the facility, and we can copy the instructors. Or if we don't want to copy the facility, we can leave it blank here, and that will not copy the facility over. This class was not part of a combined section, but if it was part of a combined section, we also have the functionality to clone combined sections. So if this Anthro 102 Section 1 was part of, let's say, combined section 7, for instance, and there were 3 other classes in that combined section, if we initiated the clone, so it'd be a little checkbox, we could clone it, it would clone all of the corresponding sections that are inside of that combined section and their associated components. And then it would create new combined section IDs, and it would create the same grouping for all of the new sections that belong in each of the new section IDs. So it would create 2 new section IDs for that combined section, et cetera. So that was another feature enhancement from another school a couple of weeks ago. So we've been trying to get in the items that we've been hearing that multiple schools would find very beneficial. We also have the ability to view more details on the class. We can select the view class, which gives us the detail there. If it was a combined section, we'd have a link for the view combined section as well. That's a high-level overview on how we can rapidly interact with the scheduled classes. Melissa or Ken, is there anything else you'd like to add here?
Hey, Chris.
Go ahead, Melissa.
So this is Melissa. So I think for the team, I think the gotcha is that when we were testing, we had demo data, and we encountered several instances where our associated class numbers were not quite up to par, in that multiple sections were associated to the same class, when in reality they needed to have their own individual associated class numbers. So when this cloning process begins, it's looking at all the associated classes, and it will clone based on that existing data. So my caution to you all is to double check before you start doing this work and before you start cloning existing sections, is to just double check your existing data, make sure there's good data integrity there, make sure your associated classes are correct, in that you don't want all of your all of your sessions or all of your class sections to have associated one. That's probably not what your intent is. So just make sure to check your associated class numbers and make sure that you have the appropriate components associated to the sections that you want to clone. Otherwise, you're going to get lots more data than what you really intended to get.
Yeah, and this example here is a good one because this is both Anthropology 101. We have class section 1 and we have class section 100, and they are both in association 1. So theoretically, this guy should have been in a different class association for that catalog number. But this is demo data. It's not the cleanest, but thank you for that, Melissa. Was there anything else you wanted to comment on this one before we dive into the enrollment piece? All right, let's go take a look at the enrollment. So with our prior example, we were looking at, let's take that actual class. It was this guy. Oh, we have a question. Is there a way to make changes to class association numbers while students are enrolled?
No. No, the delivered, this is Ken, the delivered software won't allow you to do it, and this runs a component interface, and so you run into the same error.
Yeah, so one thing that might need to get done for that, or one way you could do that, is you could theoretically leverage the class maintenance, move everybody out of the class, adjust the association, then move the students back into the class.
Right. Or create a new section and move the people as you want to, and then do something, do whatever you need to do with the first one, or maybe throw the original one away and replace it with new ones that work better.
And that's really, so that the associated number integrity is really only going to impact you with this tool if you're doing cloning. If you're not cloning and you had them all with associated class number 1, that's not going to impact you. It's only if you're cloning the class, because it will clone all associated classes in order to keep the grouping integrity. Thanks for that question, and thank you, Ken. Okay, so we have our example where we're looking at Anthro 102. Originally, we were talking about dropping the enrollment capacity down to 4. We were going to clone it 2 more times so that we'd have 3 sections with 4 capacity so that we could fit all 11 students. So let's just keep let's keep running with that example. So Anthro 102, let's go look at the enrollment maintenance. So now that we've generated our the new sections that we might need, or we've updated our sections to maybe move off from the let's say an in-person to a internet or a digital experience, let's talk about how we want to now move enrollments. What was it, 298? Dun, dun, dun. Maybe it was not 298. Let's take a look. 102. Goodness, I've been doing way too much testing on too many classes. Okay, Anthro 102. So here is our, but it was section, I think it was this one, section 1, because we had 11 and enrollment cap of 10. Okay, so what we're gonna do, there's an issue with this class here. So if I wanted to, I could say, give me all anthropology classes that are over capacity, because we need to fix them, we need to move them. So I'm at 100% capacity or more, and in comes Anthro 102. So what we do is, it's the same search as what you'll get from the class schedule. We're going to select that class. It pushes us over into this other page in the component, the enrollment maintenance. And this is where we start to leverage this concept of moving the enrollments based on a source class section, which is the Anthro 102. And what we're wanting to do is we then need to look at the information, and we know we're over by 1, so we need to figure out how we want to move them. So we're going to start looking at the assignment options. The first option that we're allowed to do is, how do we want to move these enrollments, or how do we want to select which or how many students to move? So we would say I could either A, move over capacity, so that would select 1 student, or I could say move all, so that would move all 11 students, or I could say just give me a specific number and I want to say let's move 6, and I could select 6 students out of the total. Then how do we select the students? We could do it by last enroll date time, which means the last student to enroll is going to be the first student selected out. So last in, first out, or it can randomly select the students. We're going to do last in, first out. Then we need to determine, how do we want to identify which section to put them in? Down below the assignment options is this target class sections. This area allows us to select open sections that we can move the student into. So I want to say I can move them into section 3, and I can move them into section 4. I see that my enrollment capacity is 10 total enrollment. So out of these 6, 3 of them should be able to go into section 3, and then the rest are going to go into section 4, because that'll put it at capacity. The next thing we could do is we could split the enrollments across. So if I wanted to evenly split the students between multiple sections, I can do that. But I kind of want to fill them up as I go, so that if I have remainder like sections that don't have students, I can then close out those extra sections later. The next item is attempt to resolve time conflicts. So we did build in a little time conflict function that will attempt to select a class out of the option that the student does not have a current date or time conflict based on their schedule. It takes the meeting patterns of the new class against their current schedule, and if we adhere to the resolve time conflicts, it will first try and find a class that does not have a time conflict. If all of the classes have a time conflict, it will pick the first one. And then the next item is we can exclude students from the selection if they have negative enrollment service indicators. So if there was a negative service indicator for no swap, no drop, no add, etc., based on the impact, then we would say exclude them. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say I want to move them anyway. So I said pull 6 students out of my total and select the last ones in, and then fill the next available section. So again, this guy should fill up, and then the rest will go here. So we're going to preview the enrollments. When we preview the enrollments, we're given the opportunity to override what class numbers they go to. We're also given the opportunity to remove some of the enrollments. So we could say, no, I don't want to do 6 after all. I'm just going to do 5 of them. So we can delete it, and now we're down to 5. I could say, now that I just removed 1, I see that I could still move 3 up. So I'm going to change this guy so that I fill the other section. So I overrode the class number for Samuel. And now, if we knew that 1676 was a related class and it had multiple related classes with it, we could manually now add those related classes. Oh, this one does, look at that. So this one has a lab. So for 1676, there was an associated lab. Let me do it here as well, because the enrollment engine would error if I don't have it, and I can set the related classes. So this functionality interacts with the delivered enrollment engine. Essentially what we're doing is we're building the enrollment header, and we're building the enrollment detail, and then it processes through the delivered COBOL enrollment engine. So for instance, if we had students that were in auto-enrolled classes, or if they were in related classes, we've got the logic built in so that we maintain that integrity, and so that you will continually, it'll drop the right classes because it's doing swaps. So it's essentially saying swap Jonathan out of 1202 and put him into 1676. if 1676 had a related class, like a lab, for instance, like 1676 did, if I don't add that related class and I run this, that is probably going to give me an error with the enrollment engine. So what we can do, let's just save this and let's run. After I run, once the process finishes, it's going to update in a table the enroll request ID, and it's going to let us know if there are any errors with the enroll, if with any of the detail. So these can all be viewed. Once we get that enroll request ID, we can then go to the mass enroll search and we can look in detail at every enrollment request that we tried to push through. But essentially the process is looping through our table down here, the preview results, and it's setting up all of these swapped requests. And we have the ability to create it, to override the action date. So if, for instance, we didn't want it on July 16th, we could set it the day before the term, or we could set it prior, etc. You can override those items. And we could see that there were no time conflicts. So if there was a time conflict, it would give us a little indicator that says, okay, Jonathan has a time conflict with 1677. So we would know that up front. And let's see if it's done running. It is done running. Let's go back. And now we can see that we have an enroll request ID, and we have 3 errors inside of the enroll rec detail. And I bet it is because these guys need related classes. So if I went back through it, yeah, that was a lab that it needed. So if I went and looked at that enroll rec detail, I bet it's going to tell me that it needed the lab because they're associated. Now I've got it fully populated. I can run this again, or I can remove the ones that were in success. So let's do that. Let's remove this guy. Let's remove this guy, this guy, this guy. I could save it and I can run it again now just on this population, now that I've corrected the related classes, and it would work. Now, if this student was already in a section that had related classes, it's smart enough to auto pull the related classes that they need to go into based on the other. But because this student was moving from a section that did not have related classes, we had to manually say what the new related class needed to be. Some other items on this page, we're able to, again, view the detail for a specific class. In addition, we can actually view the rosters that are part of that class. Same thing with our source class. We can view the class and we can view the roster. And it does look like we have a couple of questions. So I'm going to move back over to our questions. Okay, when new association numbers are created during a cloning job, will the association settings follow the defaults for the course, or will they copy from the source association?
When this is Ken, when it makes new association, when it makes a new section, when we clone new sections, we increase the section number by 1, starting with the highest section number that already exists. So if you already had 4 sections of some course, the next one would be section 5, and the association number would also be section 5, or would be association number 5. And if we clone multiple association numbers, they all keep the association number that gets cloned. So the class number gets incremented, and the association numbers stick with the section number, so that you don't create doubles for yourself.
Does that answer your question, Scott?
Not really. Can you? Okay.
And maybe it would help as well if I navigate to the page and then we can reference the fields directly.
Right.
Perhaps we can just unmute Scott, and it might be easier to just for him to talk through it instead of having to type so much.
Just that association. It seems like that's those. Have we tested that? I don't think they do.
So that would be here. We just.
Yeah. And the second tab, I believe, yeah, that one. No, it's the third one. I'm sorry. Well, there's other stuff too there, but this is what Scott is asking about. I don't believe that copies, but I can't remember testing it myself. Have you recall, Melissa?
I don't believe we are touching that component. I mean,
don't believe so.
beyond what the component interface automatically does with the schedule of classes creation.
Well, I'll add that to my test list.
Yeah, we will, Scott, we'll look into that. I don't believe we are interacting with this area. Essentially what we're doing is from the schedule of class meeting. So whatever the delivered functionality is doing when we, oh, where did I go? Wrong place. Once we add a class, and just by changing the associated to a new number is what's happening. So it's probably not copying over what's in the other association, would be my gut. Yeah. Because it's not going to know that we were coming from associated class 1 and now we're going into 4. So it's not going to know to copy any of the detail from 1. All right.
We'll add it to our test list.
Yep, thank you for that, Scott. Okay, so we have a need to have the general facility IDs cleared out on the meeting patterns and then reassigned. Department-owned spaces are fine. Can you explain again how this can be achieved? Okay, so let's dive into the class schedule maintenance page. Let's see how many classes come up. Okay, here's a good list. So if we wanted to clear, let's say all sections that are part of Psychology 495, and you could open this up even wider. I think we've done a search that's returned around 900 rows in this grid. It starts to slow a little bit, but this is our demo environment, so it's not a nice beefy, it's not even a nice beefy dev or test environment. So your mileage may vary on how many rows you can get into this grid before you start to see a little bit of slowdown. But if you do, just slice and dice your data a little bit more. But let's say for this one, we've got 36 sections. So if we wanted to say that I want to clear all facility IDs, what I would do is I would select all. So it selects every class section. And then what I would do is I'd say, I want to update the facility ID, and then I leave this blank. And then I click this apply to selected. Then what it does is it says, okay, update my facility and update it to blank. Then I would save and I would run. When you run this, it's then going to loop through every row that was selected. It's going to look for changes, and then it's going to update the facility. And it's going to update the facility for all meeting patterns. So it's a carte blanche facility update to all meeting patterns for that specific section. Does that answer your question, Becky? Okay, excellent. And that was, again, that was another feature. We heard it from multiple institutions and colleges. So we just added that one in this week, which is why if you've already received this code earlier this week, you don't yet have these updates. And you will notice as well that we've standardized some of the columns, and you'll notice that we're leveraging tabs now because this grid was getting awfully wide. You can expand it all if you wanted to see all of the data. Here's an example of a combined section. So if you see that we wanted to clone the combined sections as we create a new section, this is how this looks. Do we have any other questions? Or Melissa and Ken, was there anything on the enrollment piece that you wanted to touch on that I may have glanced over?
This is Melissa, and I wanted to just kind of give a heads up to our community on the enrollment maintenance component of it. So the deliver functionality is auto enroll and related class enrollment. They actually act a little bit differently. So that's why you want to make sure that when you are swapping a student from a lecture lab component to another lecture lab component, and if you have auto enroll, you need to make sure that you insert those rows and pull in that related class section, because auto enroll and related class under the delivered functionality does look a little different, and it holds the data in the student enroll tables slightly different. So we want to make sure we do have a note out on the documentation, but I think it's kind of good to hear it multiple times to make sure that if you're going from auto enroll to related, you pull in that additional section, or you can go from auto enroll without any problems. And if you go from related to related, it knows, our functionality knows, and it can grab that prior related class information. So, and we will prompt you to the new class that needs to be selected. But if you go from auto enroll to related, then you'll want to make sure you insert those additional rows. Otherwise, you will error out.
And by error out, we would get this error count from the enrollment engine. So it maintains the data integrity. So it's a good thing. And if we went and looked at this detail, it would tell us, oh, you're missing the related sections, AKA you're missing the lab that goes with that lecture. So then you can come back in and add it.
I think the biggest testing areas for us when we were building this out was the associated classes for the class schedule maintenance portion of it, and then the related auto enroll for the enrollment maintenance portion of it. So those two areas are the big gotchas for each of these components. We do use deliver functionality for the CIs and for the enrollment requests, but you know, there isn't a whole lot we can do about data that isn't quite as it should be.
And we do have 20 more minutes. Does anyone else have any questions or any feedback or features that you see we may be missing that might be beneficial? All right, on that note, let's dive back in. And
Chris,
yes.
I can do a couple of questions just to confirm, because for folks like Scott and Perry, I think this is, you know, triple hearing this, so apologies to them, but this is built out in tools A57, CS92, but we know that campuses have loaded to A55 and A56 tools. It is built in Classic. And then the other aspect of is we do copy the class attribute table values. So the main components that we're looking at copying over is the basic data, and then enrollment controls information, the enrollment capacity on enrollment controls on our current release, which is 2B. And then the new release that's coming up next week will address much of the settings on the meetings tab in the schedule of classes. That
and
was
one slight correction. We're on 2C, so 2 Charlie.
2 Charlie will be released next week.
No, 2 Charlie was released a day or two ago.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I think it might have actually been yesterday.
Okay, so next week would be 2D then.
Or 3.
Yeah, I think it might go up to 3. We'll see. We haven't named it yet. It's been a pretty big chunk of functionality.
This is Ken, just to add to a couple of Melissa's general things. On the enrollment, we generally override everything. The approach we took was that if a student was allowed into the class initially, the student should be allowed into the class we moved them into. So we override pretty much everything. There's in the user's guide, it has a list of exactly the overrides that we included. But in general, that was our philosophy. Trying to think of anything else we should tell you, warn you about.
I think we can say is there was an early feedback. The reason why under that attempt to resolve time conflicts, there's an exclude students with service indicators. So that one was a result of an early, our pilot response was that if a student had an enrollment service indicator impact, so one of our ENR impacts, you know, the IENR, DENR, CENR, all of those guys, you can prevent them from showing up into the grid by having that checked on. They will never show up into the grid. And it only pertains to the ENR service impacts because we're talking about enrollment. But once they show up in the grid, then their settings, you know, we are overriding quite a bit of things. So you'll want to double check to make sure that those settings are appropriate for you by going to the documentation.
All right, thanks for that, Melissa and Ken. And feel free, anyone, if you have additional questions, just let us know. Quick little timeline on what's yet to come. So we're currently in the open office hours for the 16th, and next week we have another more of a forum, but it may be a very similar format to this. It's hoping that more and more folks have had a chance to actually start testing, so we've got some more detailed questions that generally, if there's one institution that has the question, there's bound to be another. And then if you do need to contact us, bug reports, enhancement requests, etc., please feel free, email Robert Lawson, that's Bob, at Sierra-Cedar.com. We have been reviewing the entire team, every single email request that's come to us. So we are reviewing everything. Your feedback is really important and we appreciate it. And then another link to our website. Please feel free. This video recording will be there as well if you'd like to review something that we discussed today. The overview from 2 weeks ago, it's great if it's your first time looking at this. That really goes into a lot more detail. And again, our contact information, please feel free, reach out to us with anything y'all might need. We have about 14 minutes, but it sounds like we may not have any more questions, so we'll just wait a moment longer if anything may come to mind. Otherwise, we'll end a little early.
And if there's someone who wants to just talk through an issue or a situation, let us know. We can unmute you. Perry, you've got your hand up. Do you want to talk?
No, sorry. I didn't mean to. Sorry, guys.
Oh,
Thanks so much, though.
no worries.
Thank you for your testing on Tuesday.
You're so welcome.
Great.
We have better people on it now, the SR experts. This is all a little over my head, but thanks.
Well, you were very helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if they identify anything else, Perry, reach out to us and we'll pounce on it as quickly as possible.
We sure will. Thanks.
Excellent. You're welcome.
And
all right.
how about Scott? Because I know he's a We've seen him before, so anything else for you, Scott?
Okay.
Perfect. Well, we absolutely appreciate your help. Let's see here. Betty, I think you were joining before. Anything from your end? Okay, well, I tried, team. I tried to get these questions. I tried.
Hopefully we will hear more as more and more folks. And I know David, it seems like have y'all done anything more up at Clarkson with your loading? Because I believe you guys were even loading it into Microsoft SQL Server. So have you guys moved into testing phase yet with your users?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
I'm sorry. Yeah, in fact, we loaded it onto a People's Tools 858 version, so we're going to go full guns in the in the unknown there.
Oh, great. Great.
Excellent.
We needed that.
Yeah, I think we heard from one other institution that was loading it into 858 as well, and we haven't heard any issues from them.
I can't imagine there will be any. It doesn't seem like there's anything that would conflict.
Yeah, it's usually easier going up.
Right.
Difficult going back. Yep.
I will let you know for sure, though.
All right. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for asking. Yep.
Becky,
All right, well,
did you have a question out there?
I think we answered Becky's earlier.
Yep, we did.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Again, we appreciate the time, and please feel free, reach out to us, join the forum next week with Hug, and we hope to talk soon. Take care, everybody.